So I have watched a lot of wrestling ever since I started watching it every week in 2022. And I've been through a lot as a wrestling fan. I made new friends, new memories, endless moments of joy, sorrow, and every emotion in between. But in that time, I've grown to realize that wrestling is one of the most frustrating things that I've ever loved. 2 years ago, I could argue wrestling was my favorite hobby over music and sports. But the more I stuck with wrestling, the more it started to feel like something impossible to move on from, even when the signs were there to tell me otherwise. As I'm recording this right now, I just finished watching both nights of Wrestlemania. Night 1 made me question why I still watch WWE. Night 2 was better. Punk vs. Roman was really good. But for a company that's not under Vince McMahon, I never thought they would set the bar this low, and I can't help but feel ashamed. And this push and pull when it comes to quality is why wrestling's been so exhausting for me. I've grown so passionate about wrestling because of the idea of what it could be. The feeling you get from some of the best moments in wrestling is something you just don't see in other sports. One of the best and most recent examples of this feeling came 2 years ago when Cody Rhodes beat Roman Reigns for the undisputed world title at WrestleMania 40. It's a remarkable moment of a beloved underdog finally reaching the mountaintop by beating the dominant world-eating champion on the biggest stage possible. But you add in the context of Cody having the longest road to the title at 15 years, leaving the company to find himself, winning the Rumble twice after almost losing his opportunity to The Rock after shedding blood and going through hell on earth, all to finally beat the Golden Boy supervillain and finish his story and hold the title his father never got to win. I remember that moment like it was yesterday, and as I was watching it, knowing the hoops that Cody Rhodes had to jump through, I couldn't help but be in awe. Moments like these are why I fell in love with professional wrestling. With all the hindsight and knowledge I had up to that point, I thought Triple H had put the company in the best position it had ever been. In my opinion, the company's future had never been brighter. If the company kept this up, it could have possibly been bigger than the Attitude Era. Unfortunately, this only turned out to be a brief honeymoon period, and it's all thanks to the butterfly effects of this odd period from Royal Rumble 2025 to WrestleMania 41. When Jey Uso won the Royal Rumble, I'll admit, I should have been happy. He was one of my favorite parts of the Bloodline story, the story that got me back into loving wrestling. But then I saw Jey exposing himself as a liability in the main event spot. He regressed in the ring, and his character lost all the nuance I loved about him. Everything about the singles push felt forced, and when the WrestleMania match ended with Jey making Gunther tap out to his own sleeper hold, I felt like I was forced to believe what was being presented with no valid reason to do so. But fine, I tried not to think much of it, and I wanted to look at the rest of the road to WrestleMania with positivity. So now let's take a look at the build to Cody Rhodes vs. John Cena for the WWE title. After losing the Rumble to Jey Uso, Cena inserted himself into the Elimination Chamber match without having to qualify for it. He tapped out CM Punk to win the match, and he was set to face Cody for the title in the main event of Night 2. A major part of this feud is also the involvement of the Cody and Rock dynamic that started in WrestleMania 40. The Rock asked Cody Rhodes to sell his soul a few weeks out from the event. Cody denied his offer, and then you know what they say, when one door closes, another opens. Cena, after 2 decades of standing for nothing else but hustle, loyalty, and respect, sells his soul to The Rock and finally turns his back on the fans. I'm telling y'all, this story had remarkable potential. It was like The Rock and Cena were going to be the headmasters of a corporate alliance that would lead to a destruction we haven't seen since the days of the NWO. And Cena, in the final year of his career, was going to go out with a vengeance. And then it fucking flopped. I wanted to believe in it so badly. I looked so ridiculous defending the fact that Travis Scott was the reason he won his record-breaking 17th title, while the man he sold his soul to was nowhere to be seen. WWE only did it to sell tickets for Elimination Chamber, and the payoff to this incredibly sacred idea was repetitive promos, inconsistent character work, dates being wasted on matches no one wanted to see, and it ended with one abrupt promo on SmackDown that turned him back face. And I really tried to make sense of it, and then I slowly realized they had no idea what they were doing. And if it were anyone else, I wouldn't be so mad, but it was for John Cena, the biggest main character this company has ever had, and they gave him one of the worst retirement runs I've ever seen. But at that time, I still wanted to believe in Triple H. My delusional ass thought the IWC was being too harsh. You know, maybe TKO, Nick Khan, Ari Emanuel, all these buffoons, all these higher-ups. I only wanted to blame them for the booking feeling so empty and repetitive. They had some good moments here and there, and I still called it watchable. And then Brock Lesnar returned, and it was settled for me. Like, the WWE was officially out of touch. They started the year on such an unbelievable high, and then we went on to reach shameless levels of stupidity. Triple H had become a shell of the booker he once was, talent was getting wasted, divisions were dying, shows were becoming borderline unwatchable, and TKO's obsession with money, sponsors, and mainstream attention led to the company losing its soul. But all of this wasn't even close to my biggest boiling point. I thought there was a chance they could get back on the right track when Drew McIntyre won the WWE title. Then he continued his feud with Cody, and Randy Orton won the Elimination Chamber. And this would kickstart the most frustrating main event build to a WrestleMania I've ever been a part of. Cody Rhodes vs. Randy Orton was a dream match that I had wanted ever since Cody came back to WWE. I didn't think they actually had the guts to sacrifice Drew's title reign without letting it breathe for a while, but what did I know? Cody wins the title from Drew on SmackDown, and now he's set to face Randy at WrestleMania. The third biggest big money dream match the company has in its hands, at the cost of Drew being an absolute joke in the main event scene for the foreseeable future. But fine, I was told, why complain? We now have the easiest WrestleMania main event feud to book. Cody, Randy for the WWE title. The story writes itself. Student versus teacher. Randy is going for his 15th world title. Cody is going up against his mentor. 2 decades of history, both have incredible legacies, being part of 2 of the most prestigious wrestling families of all time. There was no way they could screw
What?
You know when I say my heart sank? That might be the biggest understatement of the century. Look, as someone who also watches football, I think Pat McAfee's a cool personality on ESPN, but when he gets involved in wrestling, he kinda sticks out like a sore thumb. So tell me, why do you think inserting him in the main event of WrestleMania is going to move the needle? And how does he draw comparisons to Sylvester Stallone? And just like that, it was cooked. I mean, guys, this company has lost the plot to levels we haven't seen since WCW made David Arquette the world champion. How? Pat McAfee aligns with Randy. His motive is to shit all over the current state of WWE, ticket prices, complain about the IWC. The main event feud of WrestleMania is now centered around Jelly Roll and Pat McAfee. Pat then proceeds to Aura Farm over a good portion of the main event, which Randy Orton doesn't even win, and Pat McAfee is banished from the business for good. What a waste of time. I'll say it right now, all the hype that I once had for WWE officially died at that moment. The honeymoon period I had in the first 3 years of the Triple H era, it's gone. It's over. Signs were there after WrestleMania 40, I guess, but there was no way in hell it should have told me it was going to be this bad. I won't say it's 2019, but it still shouldn't be this pathetic. I now have to accept the fact that my greatest years of watching WWE, it's all behind me now. And you know what's funny? I kind of already experienced all of this before, and it's really ironic to think about. I thought the worst year for a wrestling company I had ever seen up to that point was AEW in 2024. I thought that after Danielson got choked out in a plastic bag, after they showed the brawl-in footage, contrary to popular belief apparently, I was infuriated with what AEW had done, and thought that there was no way they could recover. I might have to add as well that my love and hate for AEW is complicated to explain. Throughout their history, I think they've done a great job to try and compete with WWE. But the reason I didn't want to celebrate AEW from 2024 to 2025 was that I thought the booking from Tony Khan was absolutely putrid. Wrestlers that I didn't like were getting shoved down my throat, wrestlers I believed deserved the world weren't getting rewarded, Collision became the most useless show in wrestling to me, and the storytelling was very flawed at times. My friends and I felt like black sheep when it came to watching AEW, and this wasn't out of bias or anything. We genuinely believed this company was getting undeserved praise. However, I would soon feel the tides beginning to turn. AEW Double or Nothing 2025. It was a show that looked good on paper, but I didn't have that much hype for. But I think Double or Nothing was the show that completely changed the public's perception of the state of AEW, with people going so far as to call this the greatest Double or Nothing event they've ever produced. And from there, AEW had the momentum and the support of the fans to be the hottest promotion in North America. And I couldn't hate it, though I still felt like I wasn't getting all I wanted with AEW. I had stopped watching it weekly, not just because other things in life got in the way, but because I thought the product wasn't worth my time anymore. Wrestling in general felt so damn empty to me, so much so that I didn't really want to engage with what the rest of the wrestling scene was doing every week. I watched New Japan, Stardom, and Marigold whenever I could, but I still felt wounded from watching the big two. However, on the day Pat McAfee aligned with Randy, I felt like I really needed a fix, so I decided to stay up to see what New Japan was up to that day. They were airing a pay-per-view named Sakura Genesis, and I watched that event in a Discord VC while introducing some of my friends to New Japan. And you know something? For all the faults that New Japan still has as a company, it still feels like they care about the art of producing a great wrestling show. The United Empire 6-man tag with Ospreay, Takeshita vs Umino, Knockout Brothers vs TMDK, Tsuji vs Newman, and this just so happened to be the night Callum Newman became the youngest IWGP World Champion in history. And I was actually stoked. Sakura Genesis showed me how wrestling can still be fun to watch in 2026, and it managed to turn those friends of mine into New Japan fans, cause it was great wrestling, direct and to the point, easy to understand, and it felt more enjoyable than what WWE was offering. I then decided to watch a full episode of AEW Collision for the first time in 2 years. A show that I had thought was useless after CM Punk had left the company. It was the Collision where the Dogs became the Trios champions, the Hurt Syndicate came back, the Young Bucks wrestled El Clon and Hechicero, and Myron Reed showed out against Kazuchika Okada. I didn't think it was perfect, but after letting out all my anger on Pat freaking McAfee, this felt different enough to make me feel satisfied. I didn't turn into a sicko, but at least I wasn't miserable for once. And suddenly, I felt like I was back at square one. I started to be content with the current state of pro wrestling. Not super excited or disappointed, I decided to just accept it for what it is. For the sake of my love for wrestling, I'm looking to focus on what I can enjoy with companies like AEW instead of being a full-blown hater. So I really do hope Double or Nothing next month is a show that I can celebrate. I may be harsh in my judgment of any type of art, and pro wrestling is no different. I've always tried to go against the sentiment that maybe it's not that deep, and perhaps in doing so, I felt like I was becoming an entitled fan who was impossible to please. But part of my growth is realizing that I can't make wrestling what I want it to be, because it can't always be that way. My greatest years of watching wrestling are definitely behind me now, but even so, I want to continue watching. I want to enjoy its greatest moments, and now with how accessible it is, whether it be in North America, Japan, Mexico, or wherever you look, you always have other options. We should be thankful that WWE isn't the only company that exists right now. There's always going to be something for you to find and enjoy. Sometimes we don't know how good we have it, but then again, we never know how bad it can get. Mania 42 disappointed me, but Roman vs. Punk was a great sign of hope that reminded me of the peak of my wrestling fandom, and it goes to show how one way or another, wrestling always goes through change. It's not always perfect, but it's something that every passionate wrestling fan has no choice but to deal with. It's going to be good, it's going to be bad, then good, then bad again, rinse and repeat. It's an inconsistent cycle that will continue to repeat and feel exhausting because wrestling doesn't have an ending. And that is what truly makes wrestling a toxic relationship.
Everybody, including that one kid right there, is a toxic dysfunctional relationship.
One that is hard to get out of because we all long for the best of what it can give us. There'll continue to be moments where you hate what wrestling has become, you endure it because you remember what it could be, and then there will be moments where you've never been more grateful to have stayed. Right now, it may feel frustrating, but eventually, there'll always be a moment that is just good enough to make you sit back, hang on, and fall in love with wrestling all over again.